Coming to you live from the Business RadioX studio, it's Franchise Marketing Radio, brought to you by IDS, an award-winning digital marketing agency that delivers integrated marketing solutions for franchisors, franchisees, and franchise development teams. Learn why over 75 brands depend on IDS's team of dedicated marketers and client service professionals to deliver a strong ROI on their marketing investment. Go to idsfranchisemarketing.com for a complimentary digital audit and consultation.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Franchise Marketing Radio. I'm your host, Rob Ganley, and today I have an awesome guest. I always say that, but I really, truly do. His brand is just on fire. They're growing leaps and bounds. I have the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Property Management, Inc., Steve Hart. It's great to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Rob. I really appreciate the invite to your show.
You got it. Well, listen, as I always do, I'm going to dive right in. I love to hear a little bit about your background, but tell us a little bit about the brand, the genesis of the brand, what you saw, I guess it was about 15 years ago, that you just wanted to change. Tell us a little bit about your vision and how that's come to fruition now today.
Absolutely. Yeah, Rob, in 2008, I found myself in a real unique position. See, up till then, I had built a career in real estate. I owned a construction company, a development company, and we were right in that wave in the early 2000s of that housing boom, and real estate was just on fire. And it seemed like I couldn't do anything wrong. You know, it seemed like anything I did in real estate and development, we were making money hand over fist, and it was great times. And then all of a sudden in 2008, you know, aside from, you know, what I felt I'd built, we started feeling pressure from the mortgage industry, what was going on with the real estate markets crashing, and it absolutely just devastated all of my businesses. And I found myself in a position where I felt like I couldn't save those businesses. That the pressure was so strong, the demands, and we had development projects that we built that we couldn't sell. And banks putting pressure on me. And I found myself in a position with a wife and 4 young sons that I was supporting that I had to find something else. I mean, it was emergency scramble mode. It was, how do I pay my mortgage and put food on the table? It was getting that desperate. Months and months of no income and actually losing money. And I was talking to a good friend of mine who owned multiple businesses. And he said, Steve, with your background, you should look into property management. And I just kind of, you know, I think I made a kind of a sneer, you know, response to that. Like, what? Property management? It was like it was below me or something. You know, that's blue collar. It's really super competitive. I think I said stuff like, you know, there's, you know, it's dealing with people's problems. Why would I ever want to get into an industry like that? But this friend of mine I really respected. He's a former Wall Street guru, again, owned multiple companies. He said, Steve, out of all my investments, I own a property management company in Las Vegas. It's my absolute favorite. And I said, why? He said, it's because it doesn't have the ups and downs that the real estate and other economies face. And that really hit home to me, Rob, because I had just lost literally everything I'd built for years because of factors and things that were out of my control. And I thought, what? There's an industry that doesn't really have the ups and downs? That's not possible. And so I drove from Salt Lake City, which is where I was living at the time. I drove to Las Vegas to see what this friend of mine, his name's Chris Layton. I drove to Vegas to see this property management business. And I was even more unimpressed, to be honest with you. I saw this little dinky office with 4 people in it, you know, filing cabinets on one side of the wall, very little technology, very little marketing. But this company was generating business and bottom line profits for Chris that shocked me. And it shocked me enough to make me think, well, maybe I should look into this. You know, I knew I could do it, even though I had no property management experience. And so I dove into it a little bit. And Rob, what I found was an industry that was really almost kind of untouched. I mean, this industry was dominated by mom and pops. I mean, there was no national brands, not at all. I mean, it's not like real estate where you got Century 21, Remax, Keller Williams on every corner throughout the country. There was not a single national brand for property management. I also saw it just being so fragmented. I call it operated and dominated by mom and pops because it was exactly that. Just a bunch of small guys kind of piecing together, operations and emerging tech. 15 years ago, there was very little technology for property managers. People didn't care about the property management industry. They were focused on the real estate, cash and checks on the big buy and sell deals. And what I learned was over 1/3 of the United States housing market was rentals, over 1/3. And whether the T-bill is up or down, whether a Republican or Democrats sitting at the White House, it doesn't matter. 1/3 of our country is going to be needing rental properties for their housing, and they're going to pay their rents. They have to. And when times get tough, sometimes people sell their homes and rent. And so when times get tough, like in 2008, more people were renting, which means more profitability for property managers. And so I saw this void, I saw this need. And I went to Chris and I said, look, I don't know anything about property management. Obviously you do, but let's do something together that's bigger than just starting a single unit for me to operate. Let me copy your model. And he loved the idea. We formed Property Management Inc. in February of 2008. And neither of us had done anything to do with franchising before. I'd never even owned a franchise, nor had Chris. And I think the ignorance maybe was a blessing at the time, because if I would have known what I know now and how hard those next several years would have been, maybe we wouldn't have done it. But blindly dove in, and you know what? We just started creating processes that franchisees could come in and follow. We started creating over the years. This took years. Our early franchisees would attest, man, there wasn't really that much when I bought my PMI franchise. There was no brand. There was no brand recognition. We were the early birds, but we gave those guys really super, cool deals early on. The franchise fee they paid were little, and we just worked together. We really leaned on our franchisees in those early years. Because remember, I didn't have this business, and Chris's business was it was good. It was a standard property management business, but it didn't really have marketing, the tech that a franchisee would need. And so we really had to create those things from scratch.
Right.
Here we are.
Well, I wanted to key in on a couple of things that you said, because it's really, I don't want to gloss over it. First of all, I wanted to ask you, and this is a guy that you've now lived a while, you've been through some things. One of the things about becoming an entrepreneur or starting a business like a franchise is it can be darn scary, right? Regardless of if it's a franchise or not, which we know in our industry, we give you an amazing shortcut. Anyone who's thinking about starting a business, an amazing shortcut, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there's psychological areas of that shortcut that no one often talks about, right? That I think are probably the most important things. And one thing you said early on in this conversation was that your back was against the wall. In 2007, maybe it was, exactly when those conversations were happening with your wife and your friend. But it's like, how do you deal with that pressure? And how do you feel now that you're on the other side and you build a franchise brand that you're able to address that issue? The issue, very few people can do what you did. Respond to pressure in a way, and you saw a clear opportunity, you went for it, you focused on it. But a lot of folks, that's where the pressure derails you, right? Tell me a little bit about how franchising removes that. Like, you remove that. You had to go through that, but no one else will. You're
wanting me to peel back the onion to show some of the ugly. Man, my story doesn't get any better. We started PMI, and I thought, because there was one other company out there doing a property management type franchise, but what they were really doing is just selling landlord services and trying to teach these franchisees how to be landlords. And our vision was so much more than that. We wanted to offer commercial property management solutions as well as residential when we rolled that out. But here I thought we were just going to sell 40 franchises in our first year. In fact, I remember telling Chris that, we're going to kill it because we don't really have any competition. And Rob, what happened was the exact opposite. No one wanted to buy our franchise. And remember, I had no income. Here I was just scraping along as it was when we started, and it got worse. By year 2, I think we sold like 6 franchises in our first year. And year 2 is similar number, maybe 7 or 8. And it wasn't even enough to pay my bills. I mean, we were losing our home. We were losing our cars. I had to drop our boat off at the bank to prevent the neighbors from seeing a bank come in and repo things. I mean, it was as bad, Rob, as it could get. My kids were on discounted government, supplemented school lunch, and they were embarrassed to go to school. And I mean, it was really humbling for myself, my wife, and our family to get this business off the ground. And it got to the point where my wife said, Steve, I love the entrepreneur vision, but it's time to get a real job. She said that. And this is 2 years in. I had 13 franchises that believed in my vision and had paid money to do this. And here I was thinking, I got to sharpen up the resume and go get a real job. And it was crazy because although I was thinking I got to take care of the family, I leaned in even more because I really believed in this. There was a need for what we were creating. And right when things were tough, I got a franchisee to buy in. And that franchise fee was just enough to pay for catch up enough bills to make it happen. And it was a real tough start with a lot of grit and grind. And it wasn't a fun, easy story to get this business off the ground. But you know what? We held in there and we created, now here we are 15 years later, the nation's largest property management brand. We have over 420 locations. One cool thing that really helped us explode is, remember I mentioned how we were listening to franchisees? Well, our franchisees were saying, hey, Steve, well, residential business is great, but I'm in Maui. There's this new thing called Airbnb here. And it would be really cool if I could do short-term rental property management. And I told them, I don't even know what that is, let alone support you and help you create systems behind that. But why don't you go ahead and do that? And I'll support you any way I can. Well, that franchise and PMI started a short-term rental component to our franchise. So franchisees that wanted to expand or even just come in and do short-term rental property management then could. Years later, we had franchisees that were just getting bombarded with requests asking them if they could manage their homeowners association. Homeowner association management's a booming sector of our housing market, but there's very few property managers that do HOA management. And so we did the same thing. We rolled out a complete book of solutions, services, technology, support, and training for our franchisees that wanted to be successful HOA managers. And what we created was a suite of services for our franchisees that can do residential, commercial, short-term HOA management. We're the only ones offering this level of expanse to people that want to do that type or those types of property management. And it's really been part of our real key to success, because franchisees that come in and thinking they just want to do residential, they have that ability to expand in their market and do more than one sector if they want. And it's really been a component to our business that's made us different than the other guys and really created a lot of demand for people wanting our franchise.
Yeah. No, it sounds like an amazing model, and one that, who thought of Airbnb, right? Like 10, 15 years ago. So that's amazing to be able to evolve and there'll be more. There'll be more, more innovations, more changes in the world. But so that's amazing from a business model, profitability, I know you guys are, as I said earlier in the show, doing amazingly across the board financially. But tell me a little bit about the real estate owner and the rental, his client or his customer, right? Tell me how what you do have solved some problems there. And obviously, when you provide a good service, people hear about it, right? People talk about it. It's still something where, locally in the market you're in and you're serving, people are going to care about how you're taking care of the owner and how the owner reflects, to whoever's renting from him. But how has having a national brand, the largest, and how have you been able to influence just providing a better level of service for both sides of that equation?
Yeah, it's evolved a lot over the last 15 years. When we first started, our systems were as simple as, helping our franchisees just answer the phone. Can you believe that? A franchisor telling and educating a franchisee on our industry is so simple. Did you know that only 25% of property managers, even right now today, in 2023, only 25% of the property managers answer their phones? That's a big problem. We're a service industry, and no one's even doing the simple basics of answering phones and talking to these owners and or tenants. So we started out with the real basics, and it worked for us. We helped our franchisees develop these turnkey systems to just making property management more manageable and just doing the little basics. Now, our systems and training has evolved a lot now. I mean, we have complete turnkey technologies that help a property manager onboard a new property and get it rent ready, and then once it is rent ready, we have marketing tools to market that property. So we're basically helping that property and that investment property owner find a better tenant quicker than if they were to do it on their own. These investment property owners think they're saving money by not having a property manager. And it's funny to us professional property managers because they'll take a couple months to turn around and clean up their home and find a tenant for that, where a good professional property manager can turn that between a tenant, turn it in a couple days, if not a week. And just that 1 month's rent that investment property owner lost by not turning it quickly that's the property management fees for an entire year for a professional property manager. And so, building out those kind of systems for owners that help owners, they help tenants. We have tenant programs that help tenants have more resources, more communication tools through apps and software and websites where they can reach out and communicate with their property manager in real time. An owner can access financial statements and if there's any repairs that need to be done on the property, they can approve repair projects or put requests in, all without picking up their phone and trying to get a hold of their property manager. This is the level of technology that we've adopted and brought into our franchise. And our franchisees are taught this and have these tools right out of the gates. And it just makes them able to just perform at a higher level than where property managers have been doing in the past.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the exciting things about being a franchisor is, you get to step back from that first one all the way back from 2008, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where you're looking at it saying, all right, that's a good business, it makes good money. But since then, it's like, how do we make it better? How do we make it better? What lever should we pull? What's the most important lever to pull? And so you're teaching and learning and constantly getting better. So with all that being said, right, these franchisees that come in now, you have 400 plus locations and you're growing leaps and bounds. How now do you focus, or is there a focus on the right candidate? How does that look now? Like when you bring in someone new to this culture, this vision, what you're doing, obviously you're a successful company. How does that look when you're looking for a new partner to bring into the brand? What are the requirements? What do you look for in a candidate, I guess?
Well, we've done such a good job at improving our training and these processes that I spoke of that really the missing link is someone that's really got a strong work ethic, someone that is willing to do the work. The property management, even with all these tools that I mentioned, it still comes down to, you still got to be able to roll up your sleeves every day and get out there and take care of those properties, take care of those owners and those tenants. If you're managing short-term rentals, you got to provide an experience for those short-term guests that are just there to, on holiday or vacation for 3 or 5 days or a week. And that experience has got to be exactly that. It's got to be welcoming. It's got, the property has to be dialed because you're hosting that guest for a week. And so our franchisees have to be really on point and willing to do that work. We can teach how to do the marketing. We can teach how to do the sales and onboarding new property owners. We've got the systems to be able to operate those things. But we find someone that isn't afraid of the numbers. Property management is a lot of bookkeeping. And if someone's more sales and marketing friendly, we have processes built in where we can do the bookkeeping for our franchisees. If we get someone that's very accounting heavy and that's what they like, but they just don't like doing the marketing and sales, we even have built-in solutions to our franchise that provide sales and marketing tools and approaches from corporate for those franchisees that are just one-man shows out of the gate, to help them bridge that gap. And of course, the first person they're probably going to hire is that salesperson, if they're more of that accounting mindset person, or vice versa.
Right. Well, and that's the beauty of franchising. Again, it's amazing to hear you talk, because it's like you have the luxury of having a model that can cater to people's different strengths and weaknesses. Like, you have that luxury. You could say, well, you can be stronger in that area, and if you are, then you can lean here. Or if you're stronger in this area, you can lean there. But
exactly. One of the cool things we've noticed is, as our processes, our systems get better, as our brand starts to become known, at 400 franchisees, we're not quite a household name yet. In fact, most people haven't heard of Property Management Inc. But as we start to become, that brand that people are starting to recognize, and we're definitely known as a leader, what we're seeing is existing property managers, all these mom and pops that I talked about earlier, they're seeing that our franchisees, brand new in their area, have better tools, better resources out of the gate as someone new to the industry than they do. And they've been operating for 5, 10, 15 years. So what we're starting to see is what we call conversions, where these existing property managers are coming to us and they say, hey, look, I want what you guys have. And can I bring my portfolio? A lot of realtors are kind of doing this on the side. It's kind of the side hustle. Well, they want to do it at a bigger, more professional level and have all the tools to keep them out of trouble, right? And so we've been doing a lot of these conversions or partnerships where we're partnering with these other property managers. And that's been a big component that we've been targeting lately. So we're not starting from scratch with everyone either.
Yeah. No, and as you said, it was a fragmented industry with a lot of mom and pops, right?
Yep.
And some of them are well run, some of them are doing the best they can, but you can't compete with the leverage that you guys have at this point.
The pricing, the pricing that we get, we have all this technology, and these mom and pops, they got to start using the technology. The days of a property manager just collecting a rent check from a tenant, knocking on their door and getting a check, those days are done. Sophisticated property managers use an ACH, and these are all built into our tech, where the rents are being collected automatically, and all these systems. If property managers not utilizing the technology nowadays, they're being left in the dust. And this technology is not cheap. And as the nation's largest property management brand, we have that ability to get that technology pricing so low that our franchisees really, even though they're paying a royalty, their cost to do business is less expensive as a national brand than someone trying to create all these systems on their own. And so that's another kind of cool component about being part of something even bigger than themselves.
Yeah, no, it's constant innovation, right? And I can't imagine in today's day and age, more than ever, and I think, we've lived through it, guys our age, we've seen technology kind of move through the 90s, with the internet, and moved a little slow and before everybody adopted it. And in the 2000s became a little more mainstream. And as other technology enabled things have started to build momentum, right? As we are now in the 2020s, to have a team behind you as a business owner that's constantly keeping an eye on innovation and those levers, because it's still business, right? But which levers are you pulling and how are you doing it? And is there technology that can make a more profound effect? And, it's hard to do that when you're a business owner, especially a local operator. You're not going to do that. You're not going to be changing and pivoting all the time. But with a franchisor, you can, because they can do the R&D, they can put the effort in, they have the leverage. And that's
exactly how.
important.
That's why there's so many mom and pops in the property management world, in my opinion. It's because it's really hard for these mom and pops to scale, because there's so many different components. You got the marketing, you got the tech, you got the sales, you got the ops side, and it's hard to have that well of a balance in all those areas for a one-man show. And it's just tough. And so what's happened to these property managers? They pick up 50 doors, maybe 100, and they just kind of stall out because they're not making enough money to really transition and hire someone of their weakness that they need in their company, because they're barely making ends meet. And so they find themselves as just grinders, just doing that day to day, making decent money, but just not enough to really expand and grow that business to more of a strategic level. And our franchise offers that. We have that ability to help them scale and really get those numbers to the point where they can make the money that they really should be making as a property manager.
Yeah, and again, that's the way you're talking shouldn't be lost on anyone that is probably the hardest thing for any local business, any entrepreneur to do on their own, is to get past that threshold of basically duplicating themselves, right? Being in a position where they can step away and it runs and it can be grown. You can grow it. You know exactly how to feed that engine and grow it.
I love
so that's hard to do.
Step away, because that's one of our goals. I stood in front of our franchisees at our annual conference 2 years ago, and I said, my goal as the CEO of this company is to create 200 millionaires in our brand. Millionaire meaning if their business value, if they were to want to exit for whatever reason, they could sell that PMI business with the portfolio they've built attached, and it'd be worth over $1 million. So they could pocket at least $1 million. And Rob, I can tell you, we are well on our way to that goal. And that's really it. We want to help these entrepreneurs be able to create something that they can own, something they can pass on to family if they want, or they can sell it when the time is right, when they want to retire or do something else. This industry and this business is that. And we've created these systems so they can ultimately be an absentee owner if they want and operate from afar. We've got several franchisees that do that, and a lot that just are there on the daily, growing their business to the point where they can exit and do what they want.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I mentioned a little earlier to you before we got on air here about, just hearing you talk, right? Hearing the kind of culture you put installed in this brand. I'm interested to know, what were some of your influences? And do you have any principle or something that you extracted from some early mentor that you it works for you? And it's been working all these years. Anything like that? Or just tell me a little bit about your inspirations.
Yeah, my dad is my biggest inspiration. He was an entrepreneur himself. And although he wasn't in real estate, he taught me from early on in my childhood that if I wanted something, I could get it. And I remember selling things at door to door, pet care services and lawn care, and I sold anything and everything I could, because I knew if I wanted something, whether it was that BB gun or that inflatable raft in the back of Boys Life magazine, I had to work for it and get that. My dad taught me the principle of hard work. And to all those entrepreneurs out there that are listening to this, whether you're interested in property management or whatever it is, we've got a cool opportunity in our country right now. I tell my 4 sons this all the time. I said, you can be uber successful in almost anything. I mean, I've become successful in a industry as dull and boring as property management because I found an opening. I found something that was needed, and I just got in and worked hard. And it's not anything super secret saucy. I know your listeners probably wanted to hear an amazing quote that's inspired me. But for me, it's just about getting in, finding a great idea, and just working hard. Surround yourself with great people. I have gotten really lucky and been able to find really good people to help grow my vision and this brand. My business partner and all of our team here at PMI Corporate is just top of the line. And that's my second bit of advice is just surround yourself with good people that have big vision.
Yeah. No, I mean, team is key. And that's the point. Because anybody that wants to be involved, you now have built that, right? You've checked all the boxes in what you just said. If someone gets involved with a franchise brand, especially a good one. So that's exactly what you bring to the table. It's great having you on the show today, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure. Thanks again.
And before we go, is there a website you want to share with the audience, a place they can go and learn more about the opportunity?
PropertyManagementInc.com. If you're interested in looking at the franchise side of our business, there's a link for franchising on there as well. It'll show you about all of our different franchise opportunities in these different sectors. We refer to them as pillars. So someone who just wants to do HOA management or someone who just wants to dive into short term can get all the information they want. And PropertyManagementInc.com.
Beautiful. Appreciate having you. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks again.